Hey there, Golden Bear family. How are we today? Welcome to Steger Central, and we're looking at the analysis questions for Chapter 6 with regard to AMSCO. Again, this parallels also some of the textbook that we read regarding the American pageant. So turning our attention as I look over the notes is question number 1, which I think is page 2 of your packet. It asks, list 3 motivations of those organizing and attending the Annapolis Convention. Well, number 1, to revise the Articles of Confederation. 2, to discuss and create a new constitution. And 3, simply fix the government and what they need to do post-revolution. The second question asks, what was the conclusion reached at the Annapolis Convention? That basically a new constitution was needed, and desperately, and fast. Going on to the next page, asks, why did James Madison and Alexander Hamilton want to draft an entirely new document rather than amending the Articles of Confederation? There are 3 things it's asking us to look for there. 1, sought stronger central government. 2, wanted a stronger nation that was unified. And 3, to publicly state what these changes would be. Why did Rhode Island refuse to participate? And that reminds me of a joke. Rhode Island, neither a road nor an island. I mean, what's going on? Rhode Island didn't want to because they didn't trust the other states. So the end of that joke would be like, government intelligence, Rhode Island. Anyhow, you hopefully get it. The next question asks, explain the role of compromise at the Convention of Philadelphia. Well, compromise allowed the Constitution to occur and to move forward, and as sides basically worked together, they conceded points that allowed the common good to become evident. So compromise, something that our present legislative branches don't know what to do well on, but certainly in the early days, they did strive for compromise. Why the framers decided only 9 out of the 13 states would need to ratify the Constitution, rather than 13 of 13 needed for the Articles of Confederation? Well, basically, there was a little trickery and sleight of hand there, but ultimately they did this because they anticipated opposition to the Constitution, especially those from the South who wanted to have states' rights far more powerful than anything the federal government would want. Going on to the next page, and the next question asks, what was the most significant argument of the anti-federalists? Well, they want a strong central government that would, and they felt that this kind of would destroy the work that the revolution had worked hard to do. What was the essence of the revolution? A king that certainly didn't listen to the people, and they felt a strong government would do that. Next question, how did George Clinton respond differently than Benjamin Franklin to the proposition that the new federal government have a strong executive branch? Well, George Clinton opposed this strong federal government that Benjamin Franklin was arguing for. Well, if you look up Google, the writers of the Federalist Papers, you would have James Madison and Alexander showing up as the top 2 contributors. Then you have John Jay, Secretary of State, coming in with the 3rd. Well, who were those who were against the Federalist Papers, or they called them the anti-Federalist responses? There were 4 of them. We have Cato, which was really George Clinton. You have Brutus, which there were actually 3, but I sense Robert Yates is probably the most recognized name that we can associate with Brutus. The 3rd one is Sentinel. Who was that? Samuel Bryan. And the one, number 4, the federal farmer. Again, there were 2 or 3 possibilities that people hinted at, but Richard Henry Lee seems to be the most accurate to place in there. The next question on the next page asks, Thomas Jefferson was not at the convention. He was serving as minister to France and was abroad. He called the convention an assembly of demigods. Does this indicate a tendency toward the Federalist or anti-Federalist side of the constitutional debate? And for sure it shows Jefferson was anti-Federalist, as he saw the delegates were power-hungry and only finding ways and means in order to benefit themselves, not really for the good of the country. The next question asks, how does the Bill of Rights differ today than the original intent of 1791? Well, one possibility we can say is that, well, the interpretations have evolved. You can see some are liberal interpretations of the Constitution, namely the Supreme Court, and others are strict interpretation of our Constitution. Next question, which amendment was the most important to the Anti-Federalists, and explain why? Remember, this is an opinion, but I'm going to stick with the 9th Amendment because it guaranteed even more rights to the citizens, and something that the Anti-Federalists wanted to curb the power that the federal government would have, they felt. Which amendment was the most significant to you? Any answer will do, but I would suspect probably the first, because it allows for our Republican form of government to exist and allows for divergent opinion and allows for a respect of one another and a strive towards being good citizens, something that we're lacking in the past 10 years of political banter. On that note, I mean, it's like our favorite pastime used to be baseball. Now it seems to be talking about politics. And boy, has it been polarizing of America over the past few years. Which amendment do you think is at the highest risk of being removed? And again, this is your opinion, but given the volatility of the media and what has been happening in our public and private schools and the marketplace, the Second Amendment has certainly been under attack, and seems to be this idea that it will be in the spotlight for some time. Going on to the next question, it asks to summarize Thomas Jefferson's response to each of the following parts of the Alexander Hamilton's financial plan. Please note, watch the next video because I'm going to be giving you a couple of tips on how to remember key aspects of this time period, kind of like a mnemonic device, if you will. But the first one is assumption of debt. This is a big deal. Please know these 4 aspects of Alexander Hamilton's plan. One, that Jefferson agreed with Hamilton with the assumption of debt. With regard to tariffs, he said he wanted them much lower. He felt that it favored the people in the North, the states of the North, and not the farmer, the gentleman farmer that he wanted. The National Bank, he felt the Constitution not give Congress the power to create a bank, and he was vehemently opposed to having a national bank. Even though Hamilton's was privatized and the biggest customer was the federal government, he felt that was not written in the Constitution and therefore should not exist. Letter D, he felt excise taxes benefit the rich at the expense of the poor. And this will be an ongoing divisive point even as we get into, make our way into the Civil War and then getting out of the Civil War. Excise taxes are big to do. The next question, reading, how did Thomas Jefferson's view of the French Revolution differ from that of Alexander Hamilton? Well, Jefferson essentially supported the French. He felt that we owed them because of Lafayette and the Battle of Saratoga. Remember, key turning point, that we have an obligation to provide and care for the French in their moment of crisis. So that was Thomas Jefferson's viewpoint. Alexander, in your reading, you should see, wanted no part of it. Neither did George Washington, which we'll see a little bit later on. Next question. Following Jay's treaty, George Washington's approval rating, to borrow a modern phrase, plummeted, and there was even talk in the House of impeaching him. Why was this treaty so offensive to some? Well, essentially, this treaty was so much of a compromise, and it watered down the whole point of what we were trying to do, is to protect not only the international waters, to allow us to trade with whom and however we wanted, but also to make sure those ships wouldn't come under attack by the British, who were far more superior in power. So this treaty did nothing to stop the British from seizing our American ships. The Pinckney's Treaty, next question, was the silver lining on the cloud of Jay's treaty. What was the long-term impact of this treaty? Well, essentially allowed the U.S. to really continue in our trade and to expand westward, which will become a big theme in our next time period as Jefferson's legacy grows and looks westward. Going on to the next page, the next question asks, to what extent did the British honor the Treaty of 1783, which stated they recognized the United States and its new boundaries? What does this foreshadow? Well, they still really encroached on the United States land and showing a lot of disrespect to the Americans and our desire to expand and grow on our own terms. What is this a foreshadow of? Well, the War of 1812. Put a little star by that, because that will come back in our next lecture or two. And the good old Whiskey Rebellion. Remember, there's 3 or 4 key rebellions that you have to be aware of, whether it be the Pontiac Rebellion or Nathaniel Bacon Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion is another one. So the question is, how did the Whiskey Rebellion end differently than Shays' Rebellion? Well, the Whiskey Rebellion was quickly put down by the federal government and done so without bloodshed. So this is a unique thing where the federal government came together, organized the troops, paid them, and sent them in to prevent this rebellion from continuing. A very bold move by President Washington. What is the significance of this difference? Well, it shows an increased strength of our federal government. Going on to the next question, how did this westward migration impact American Indians living in the Ohio Valley and Mississippi Territory? Well, the westward migration deeply upset the Indians, again, causing them feeling like these treaties that they'd signed were being broken, which they were, and it caused them to begin working together and finding allies within their tribes, no longer choosing the French or the British to side with, or even the Spanish, but they're now trying to ally with one another. The next question is, how did California differ from the United States in terms of interactions of whites and natives? Well, California was under Spanish colonial rule at this point, and meaning that whites were trying to force the natives into their Spanish culture in an encomienda system or the Spanish mission system or asistencias that were part of that. But yeah, it's a different structure, both socially and economically and politically. Going on the next page, question asks, explain how the first two-party system, remember, bicameral, please put that in your notes, bicameral, that will show up on a test, and it will be on the AP exam for sure. You need to know what that means. How the bicameral two-party system illustrate the evolving American system and American identity? Well, it illustrated this divergence in American thinking that represented like the British tyranny and the ineffectiveness of the Articles of Confederation. Going on to the next page, let me take a look and see what we have here. This is where you're supposed to highlight certain parts. So let me lead you through some key things there. I would say in section 32, that first sentence basically says permanent invertebrate antipathies against yada yada. That first sentence there. Then go down to 33, that first sentence there. Go down to 34, the last sentence there. 35, somewhere in the middle, it talks like the foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. That would be significant. In 36, towards the end of that first sentence, says to have with them as little political connection as possible. 37, it's that last sentence or phrase there. It must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves. Do that whole sentence. Going on to 38, skip 39, that second sentence there, basically saying why by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, etc. Do that. And number 40 is the kicker, is the clincher, is the one thing that you should know about this document. It has been used and talked about still today. Is that first line, that steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. Boom! Nail it, circle it, highlight it. Let me help you with some of those questions down below there. The first question is, how did the nation follow Washington's lead on a two-term limit? Well, until FDR won his third term in 1940, that was the protocol. How did the nation follow Washington's lead in neutrality? Well, we were pretty coy, and even until 1898, as we began growing militarily and kind of encroaching on different people with the Spanish-American War. But ultimately, our neutrality didn't give up until World War I. That's how long America stayed out of European affairs. Why did Washington believe political parties were dangerous? Well, he believes it misrepresents the other side. It only represents a handful of people. He believes parties tear people apart. And I think we're seeing that quite handsomely and with tremendous depth of how much divisiveness happens in a country that has these two parties that never come together to compromise. What did Washington's fear in America, fear in America's future? That the parties would divide and destroy the country. how appropriate this speech is still to this day. And food for thought, it asks, why is George Washington's farewell address read aloud on the floor of the Senate annually ever since 1862? Well, because his words echo and ring true still today and are a reminder of what our country was founded upon. And I don't know what it's going to take to get our Senate and Congress to begin reading that and taking it to heart. Going on to the next analysis section, it asks, explain the weakness in the presidential election process of 1796 and what does this flaw reveal about the framers of the Constitution? Well, that they felt the second leading vote receiver becomes automatically the vice president. The framers didn't expect massive disagreement over issues or political thrusts or parties. So this was changed later on, but initially that was the second leading vote getter became the vice president. Now, on this next page, a suggestion. On the left-hand side in the middle, where we're doing the context of what you read, I would divide it up into two parts. So you see the word where it says leaders. I would have feds at the top of that and underline it, and I would have Democrat Republicans on the other side of that chart and underline that, and just kind of create two columns as you go down. It will help you organize how those 4 or 5 key aspects should be viewed. So chart that out in that way. So going back to those questions, says these two political parties are not the same as the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists of the Constitutional Convention and the ratification process. So what is similar? Well, the Feds and Federalists both wanted powerful central government, and the Anti-Feds and the Democratic Republicans wanted a weak central government. Well, what is the difference? Well, the Federalists are pro-British as compared to the Federalists. Remember that the Federalists are, Alexander Hamilton. And then the Democrat Republicans were pro-French. That's where Thomas Jefferson comes in, and as opposed to the other Federalists who were not. John Adams is considered one of the most underrated presidents. Support, refute, or modify this statement. Please know some things about John Adams and his keen mind and how he helped navigate his presidency. Well, essentially, I think he was able to avoid war with France, which was huge. There's no way America in our young infancy, we didn't even have the power to tax, have central bank, all that. There's no way we could have ever taken on a war with France. So that was a keen stroke of genius on his part. The next question, how James Madison and Thomas Jefferson illustrated the continued American spirit of rebellion after independence and the creation of a new republic. Well, both Jefferson and Madison led states to defy the central government in order to protect the rights of the individual and rights of the state. This is still a legacy that continues on today. The Democrats typically wanted to be a strong central government, taking away the rights of the individual, whereas Republicans typically want to have the rights of the state and the person and smaller federal government. What role did Alexander Hamilton play in the election of 1800? Well, Hamilton helped Jefferson get elected. Hope this isn't ruining you watching Hamilton play for the 50th time and memorizing parts of that fantastic thing. So here comes a spoiler. Spoiler alert. Did this cause his death? Yes, because Aaron Burr killed him and caused that tension between that Hamilton and Jefferson scenario. Next question, I think we're almost getting done here. Why is this election sometimes called the Revolution of 1800? Ding, ding. That could be a test question for me. And it's just it's a thing that you should know as Jefferson, that because it was a complete change in power. By having Jefferson come in as the new president, it made a declaration by the American people that they do no longer want the Hamiltonian big government, big power type of thing. They want to go to a Republican type of government that is fueled by the small person, the farmer, gentleman type of thing. It was a unique shift. So again, a complete change in power. The next question is asking, let me look over this to make sure I'm doing it. Yes, it's dealing with Anti-Federalist versus Federalist in the 1780s. What's the local context? Well, it's disagreement over the ratification of the Constitution. That was the local. What about the broad? What does this mean for the broad strokes of this time period? Well, the Feds desired a strong central government. after the failure of the Articles of Confederation, well, the Anti-Federalists feared another strong central government would be just like the British and having a king that will rule without any power check in its place. Well, what can we look outside of this context? Well, maybe this is similar to the Civil War, a fight between the pro who wanted a strong central government in the north and those in the south who were pro-state and wanted limited sovereignty and power of the federal government. So the rest of the part is on your own. It has been great chatting with you and hopefully helping you. Go Bears. Take care.